Welcome to Creating a Family, talk about adoption. Today we're going to be talking about how to protect citizenship for your internationally adopted children. To say this is timely would be an understatement. We have been flooded with questions. This is a really important topic. Here's a sample of what you're going to hear.
Especially as the children turned 16 years old, all of a sudden there's a mad panic by their adoptive parents because they're finding out that their children might have difficulty getting a driver's license. They can't apply for FAFSA loans for university or FAFSA. And all of a sudden it becomes an issue that's been dormant since their children came to the United States.
This show is brought to you by Creating a Family. We are the National Adoption and Foster Care Education and Support nonprofit. I'm Dawn Davenport, and I'm your host, and I'm also the director of Creating a Family. And you can find us in all of our resources at creatingafamily.org. This show is underwritten by the Jockey Being Family Foundation. Their mission is to strengthen adoptive families through post-adoption services, which is, those of you who are regular listeners to this show know, is a subject near and dear to my heart. Their founder, Deborah Waller, who is the chairman and CEO of Jockey International, says, "One failed adoption is one too many." You can support their mission by buying a cute little stuffed bear or a blanket at their website, jockeybeingfamily.com, and we thank them for their support. In addition to the underwriters, we also have partners who believe in our mission of providing unbiased, accurate information both pre- and post-adoption. One of our wonderful partners is Children's House International. They are a nonprofit, Hague-accredited international adoption agency with programs in 13 countries. They provide full services, including home studies in the states of Florida, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Texas, Utah, and Washington State. And they place children with any U.S.-approved family worldwide. Today, we're going to be talking about how to protect citizenship for internationally adopted children. We're going to be talking with Irene Steffas. She is with Steffas & Associates in Atlanta. She is approved under the Hague regulations for intercountry adoption, and she is an attorney that specializes in both adoption and immigration law. Irene has been for the longest time my go-to person to ask all questions citizenship-related and internationally adopted-related when it has to do with immigration. Irene, you are my go-to person, so I am so thankful that you're with us today to talk about this topic. It's such an important one. I bet you get a lot of questions on this topic, do you?
We absolutely do, especially as the children turned 16 years old, all of a sudden there's a mad panic by their adoptive parents because they're finding out that their children might have difficulty getting a driver's license. They can't apply for FAFSA loans for university or FAFSA. And all of a sudden it becomes an issue that's been dormant since their children came to the United States. So, yes, we see a lot of this.
Yeah, I bet you do. And I'm glad you mentioned when it tends to come to the head. And what we would like to do is provide information to families so that they have this they get this taken care of long before they wait 16 years when their children are 14 or however many years when they're children. All right, so let's just start at the very beginning. Does my child need a certificate of citizenship? I've adopted internationally. My child is coming over, now. And first of all, do I need proof of my child's citizenship? Do I need a certificate of citizenship?
In my opinion, the answer is yes. There has been a long, ongoing debate about a passport versus a certificate of citizenship. So let me explain why I think it's important. Every alien, including adopted children, have an alien registration number. It begins with a letter A and is followed by 9 digits. That number originated with Legacy INS, or what we call them today, USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration Service. So that's where it started. And the passport doesn't come from Department of Homeland Security or USCIS. It comes from the Department of State. And the State Department and Department of Homeland Security very seldom talk to one another. And their computer systems are definitely do not share this information. So I like to go to something that is going to be permanent. It's in the record, and it's not going to expire. Passports can expire. The other thing that we're seeing is people who have had a passport and try to renew it. They're now being asked, please send us your certificate of citizenship. So it's not enough to have the passport. And, you know, the Child Citizenship Act, everyone was so excited about it because it was automatic. And your children are automatically U.S. citizens. But they didn't finish the rest of the statement. And the rest of the statement is, it's automatic, but where is your evidence when different government bodies are asking you for evidence that your child is citizenship? You have to have something tangible to give them, and that's the certificate of citizenship. Never expires.
Okay, so what would flag if a person has a passport and they're going to renew it? What would flag the Department of State to even think to ask for proof of citizenship? I mean, I've had a passport, of course, for many years, and when it's going to expire this in a year and a half, and I just send it in and fill out the paperwork, and a new one comes. So why wouldn't the same be true for internationally adopted people?
Okay, Dawn, where were you born? I'm not going to ask you when you were born, but where were you born?
Thank you. I was born in Louisiana.
Okay. So if you're born in the United States, you are a citizen through the Immigration and Nationality Act, period, paragraph. But if you were born in Phnom Penh, if you were born in Guadalajara, if you were born in Nassau, Bahamas, now there's another line of questioning. And so that other line of questioning is, how did you become a citizen? And so for you, no one's going to ask you to produce additional paperwork. They already have your birth certificate in the system. But for a child who's born outside of the United States, they're not going to have that data. Now, it's interesting because there are places in the United States, especially the northwest corner of the U.S., continental United States, that getting a passport is a bit easier, and they're not as strict with the rules. But as I hear from adoptive parents, they're telling me, we have a passport, they won't renew it. We have XYZ, we can't get a passport. The passport offices are today requesting the certificate of citizenship. It's not 100% of the passports, but I would say it's probably 98%.
Okay. All right. We're going to come around to a U.S. birth certificate in a minute. But before we do that, you mentioned the Child Citizenship Act, and you're right, it was passed in 2000. And let me just pause here and say that the Department of State has a pretty good FAQ page on the Child Citizenship Act. So you can go to travel.state.gov and then just search for Child Citizenship Act and FAQ page. So that's just a good place to begin to understand. But you're right, when the Child Citizenship Act passed, I think we all thought that's going to take care of the problem. So let's talk about, because prior to that, parents had to apply for the certificate of citizenship. Now what happens? Okay, let's say a family has adopted. They bring the child home. What happens at that point following the child citizenship?
Okay, I'm going to give you the broad answer first, and then I'm going to go to a specific period of time, which causes a lot of people a great deal of consternation. So if a child enters the United States and you look in their passport, which is not an American passport, it'll have some letters and numbers. If it says IR3 or IH3, it means your child is a citizen. And if your child entered after February the 27th, 2001, your child is automatically a citizen. Great.
Yay.
Now,
that's good. Yeah.
Where's your evidence? Well, adoptive parents were really annoyed that they had gone through this long, arduous process. They had come home, and now they had to fill out more paperwork, pay more money to get the certificate. So between January of 2001 to January 2004, children who entered with IR3s or IH3s still had to file the N600 and still pay the filing fee. But because of the advocacy of the adoptive parents and those in the adoption community, that today happens automatically. So if your child entered after, let's just say February 1st, 2004, with an IR3 or an IH3, your certificate of citizenship should have arrived in the mail from USCIS, the Buffalo field office, Buffalo, New York field office. So it comes automatically. Those kids are in great shape. However, all adopted children don't enter with an IR3 or an IH3. IR3 is for non-Hague countries. IH3s are for children who are born in Hague Convention countries. But we have some additional visas, and those are the IR4s or the IH4s. When you get a 4, it means there's more to do. And parents of children who have the IR4 or IH4 must go to court in the United States and do something. So let's say the country of origin only gave you a guardianship. Well, you have to take that guardianship to court and finalize it, turn it into a final decree of adoption. You have to do that prior to the child's 18th birthday. Okay? Once you've done that, voila, your child is a U.S. citizen, but you don't have proof. Mm-hmm. So you have to file the N600, pay the fee, and then you'll get the certificate of citizenship. Now, one time that you'll get the IR4s is if you didn't get a full and final decree overseas. The second reason you might get an IR4 is it may be that only one parent saw the child prior to the adoption, or it might be that the adoption was done by proxy. We saw that with a lot of the cases coming from Guatemala. Well, they gave the child a visa, but USCIS, and actually the U.S. government as a whole, wanted to make sure that this didn't just happen because somebody tricked their spouse in signing papers. So they said, we want to make sure that both husband and wife or both partners are invested in this, so we want them to go to court and readopt those children. You do the readoption, voila, your child's a citizen, but you've got to get the evidence by filing the N600. Does that make sense?
It makes good sense. All right. So and keep in mind, I mean, the prices are continually going up, but it's not inexpensive to get the certificate of citizenship. So that's something that it's important to know that you're going to have to spend some money. And quite frankly, they continue to increase. The price continues to increase.
Yes.
So that's something to know. Okay, what's the difference between a certificate of citizenship, which you were just talking about, and a certificate of naturalization, and is that an important distinction?
It's not a huge distinction. This is important for attorneys or nerds like myself. A certificate of citizenship means that the child has derived citizenship through his parents. The certificate of naturalization means that this person has actually applied. They have passed the English test. They can read, they can write in English, and also that they could answer questions in civics. You don't have that process and that scrutiny with a certificate of citizenship.
Gotcha. And so for internationally adopted children, the relevant certificate is a certificate of citizenship because they're obtaining their citizenship through us, through their parents. Okay.
Unless, and this question comes up, so hopefully I'll answer this before someone has to ask the question.
Okay.
What if I missed the age 18 deadline and I didn't get around to going to court to readopt or to finalize that guardianship? Okay, we're not going to penalize the child. Once the child has had their green card or legal permanent status for 5 years, they can then apply for naturalization. Okay, so and we see that happen rather frequently. Sometimes adopted children are simply not told that they were adopted, and then they find out later in life. Mm-hmm. I had a 42-year-old lady from Chicago contact me. She couldn't get a passport. She couldn't understand why. And I suggested she go back home and have a heart-to-heart with her parents. And they finally told her at the age of 42 that they had adopted her, full and final decree of adoption, from South Korea. But since she was 42, the Child Citizenship Act did not apply to her. And she had to apply for naturalization.
Okay. And the important point you've already mentioned is that certificates of citizenship are permanent. They do not expire.
That's correct.
But is it important to, is it convenient? Are there advantages to, in addition to getting your child's certificate of citizenship, to getting a passport for your child? And let's say, obviously, if you're planning on traveling abroad, the answer would be yes, of course. But even if you're not planning on traveling abroad, are there advantages to obtaining a passport?
I really, no. The passport is really meant as a vehicle for you to travel and nothing more. Now, people... there are huge advantages to having a certificate of citizenship. Let's say you have a child that's pulled over and they get arrested. If they don't have evidence that they're a citizen, they're not in the system. They may end up going into immigration detention, which we've all learned way too much about that watching the news recently. They may accidentally get deported. Now, before you get deported, we now use the word removal. Before that happens, there's usually a hearing, so parents can, run up and say, no, my child's a citizenship, and here's why. But you don't have that in the computer files of Department of Homeland Security. There are real advantages to being able to prove that your child is a U.S. citizen. For example, you don't have to be a citizen to enroll in the U.S. military. However, if you want to become a commissioned officer, you have to be a citizen. Mm-hmm. You have to have citizenship in order to apply for certain licenses, like to own a ship, to have a liquor license and a liquor store. Certain government jobs that have high security, you have to show that you're a citizen. To apply to college and get the FAFSA loans, you have to show that you're a citizen. And obviously the most obvious one of all is only citizens are permitted to vote.
Well, but Irene, it seems to me that just from and I speak as a mom who is a mom through international adoption, just from a practical standpoint, having a passport, not that what you're saying is not correct, but but so many people don't realize that. So a passport, that a passport isn't actually proof. And so for my kids, it's been passports all they've ever needed for anything. And
How old are they?
Well, let's see, in their 20s.
Okay, they're in their 20s. So you've gone through college. That wasn't a problem in college.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to produce any citizenship papers. Okay, and
my point is only not that it's just from a convenience standpoint. Most people assume that and the other advantage is that those certificate of citizenship papers are so precious. And although I think they can be replaced if you lose them, I think they would be very. I think it would be very hard. Whereas if you lose your passport, I mean, you certainly not, it's not.
No, you're correct. You're correct.
Yeah.
If I had my choice, I would like adoptees to have both their certificate of citizenship, and then, as a matter of convenience, also have their U.S. passport. But if I had to choose between the two, I would go with the certificate of citizenship. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So a question would be relevant to what I just said about certificates of citizenship. Because they are precious and because they are costly, is there something that can you get a notarized copy of it so that you can submit that if you're going to have to get a passport, or you have to submit it with your FAFSA or whatever? To send that off, your only original copy, is nerve-wracking in the extreme. So is there something
I understand.
What can we do in lieu of that?
Well, what I would do, and you're dating yourself, Dawn, now by asking me this question. I'm sorry. Scan it and save it in your computer.
Well, that's what my question was exactly. Will they
scan it and save it? Well, I would scan it and save it in my computer. No. I would scan it, save it in my computer. If I had an adoptee, I would probably scan it and put it on their phone as some kind of a document that they could pull up in their pictures. And
exactly.
But when you apply for your passport, you do have to send in the certificate of citizenship. Now, I can tell you that I have never, and I've been around a long time, over 30 years, I've never heard that the State Department didn't send back a document. Okay, so you will get it back from the U.S. Passport Office, which is part of the State Department. They're very good about that. But you do have to send the original. Yep.
And there are likely other things that not that I don't agree that you should scan it, because you obviously should. You should have that ready access to it. But the scanned copy itself is not necessarily going to be accepted as proof. So that's something I think
that's
that
correct.
we have to,
we
have to realize. Okay, and so a notarized copy is not something that's not a thing that we can do.
No, sorry. No, that won't fly.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate. Yes, okay, but okay. All right. Now let's move to talking about: is it required to refinalize an adoption that has already been finalized abroad? You've adopted your child, and I think most countries now the adoption is actually completed abroad. So you have a
final decree.
Mm-hmm. What are the advantages and perhaps disadvantages, other than hassle and cost, to refinalizing and doing an adoption here in the U.S.?
Well, if the child entered with an IR3 or an IH3, the advantages might be that the child's name was not changed in the foreign decree. So you may have to do the readoption just to change your child's name. I see this a lot with the Chinese adoptions. Not always, but in some of the Chinese adoptions. Beyond changing the name, your child will get a certificate of foreign birth, and it looks like everybody else's birth certificate. And the third very minor benefit would be your important documents regarding your child's adoption are now archived in the U.S. in a U.S. courthouse.
Mm-hmm.
People lose things. I adopted my child from Florida. I've never had to pull out any of my adoption paperwork. His birth certificate has been the only document we've ever had to show anybody. But some people do that. I try to explain to people that with an IR3 or an IR4, they're just helping contribute to my office revenue. I don't think I really don't think it's necessary. I really do not like when I hear colleagues scare people. Well, in case the Russians change their mind, they could come and get you. No, that's not going to happen. Once your child is a U.S. citizen, the State Department is behind you 100%. So that's just nonsense. Now,
is there an advantage to having it in English? Because some adoption decrees have not been translated. So is there an advantage there to having something in English?
Well, the adoption decree had to be translated before the State Department gave you the child's visa. So that has happened. You may have misplaced it, but it existed somewhere. The child's birth certificate had to be translated. Now, it might be cumbersome dragging around a birth certificate in Chinese and then the translation. So as a matter of convenience, you might want to get the certificate of foreign birth. In some states, I know Delaware is one of them, you can file some minimal amount of paperwork with the vital records of your state, and they will issue a certificate of foreign birth. Other states make you go through a process of domesticating your foreign decree. So it's going to vary by, what your state law is.
If you readopt your child in the U.S., is it possible to get a U.S. birth certificate for an internationally adopted child?
No. What it says, if you look at the birth certificate closely that's issued by Vital Records in your state, it'll say on top, Certificate of Foreign Birth. So you can't switch it and say, oh, my child was born in Louisiana. No, your child wasn't born in Louisiana. Your child was born in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. So you can't change that. But so it'll always be a certificate of foreign birth. It will never be a U.S. birth certificate. I had someone call me this morning.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I had someone call me this morning, and she said, Irene, I can't find Laura's paperwork. And I said, well, what year did we do her adoption? It was 1997. And she had to do a readoption because she adopted her child from Bulgaria. And at that time, the adoption was done by proxy. And I said, she goes, I can't find her birth certificate. And I was like, no. It's not her birth certificate. You're missing her certificate of foreign birth. Oh, yeah, that's what it is I can't find. So, we're checking our files before we send her down to Vital Records to get the certificate of foreign birth.
Okay. And is there an advantage to having the certificate of foreign birth? I mean, are you required to have that?
You're not required to have it. It's a matter of convenience.
Okay. So, and there's an amazing amount of times that you don't think of that you're going to need a birth certificate. I mean, something as mundane as getting your child enrolled in a soccer team. There are age cutoffs, and you've got to submit proof that of your child's age, and many teams, particularly as they become more competitive, require that it is a birth certificate. So there could be an advantage to getting a certificate of foreign birth, which it has the appearance of a U.S. birth certificate.
Again, it's a convenience. It's not legally required. The only time that you have to go to court is if your child entered with the IR4 or IH4 visa. Okay,
so many people rename their children for whatever reason. Now, assuming that the child's original name was on their adoption decree in the country of their birth. How do you go around? So you've got that adoption decree. first of all, what name is going to be on your child's certificate of citizenship?
Okay, I had a very similar case to that with a little bit more salt and pepper to it. So let me tell you about this case we did from North Georgia about a year ago. Couple came into my office. They adopted 2 children from China. On their eldest daughter, they had all of her paperwork, no problem. And we were able to domesticate their foreign decree, get her a Georgia certificate of foreign birth, and then get her certificate of citizenship. No problem. And in that process, they changed her name. The second child, they had lost everything, absolutely everything. Now, their name was not Smith or Jones, but it wasn't a terribly unusual name, and they remembered when they returned to the U.S. with their daughter. We did a Freedom of Information Act, and now it takes a while for them to send you the results, but we finally got the results. Everything was there that was sufficient for us to now go to court, do a readoption, and at the same time change that child's name. So
the lesson here is don't lose your paperwork. But other than that lesson, don't panic.
But if you if you do, it's going to take a lot of work. But you can, through the Freedom of Information Act, be able to retrieve the most important documents.
Interesting. I have actually never heard of anybody having to FOIA to get that information. That's fascinating. All right. So. But if you're coming now, if the child is coming after 2004, the certificate of citizenship is going to be automatically mailed. What name will be on that certificate if the child's adoption decree is still in the child's foreign name?
Okay, it'll be whatever that foreign name is. And so now, you're married, right, Dawn?
Yes,
Okay. Well, you had a maiden name, and you probably had a passport in your maiden name. At least I did. I had many passports in my maiden name because I didn't get married till I was 36. Then I got married. Well, it wasn't time to renew my passport. So what did I do? I made a photocopy of my marriage certificate and carried it with my passport so that when I traveled, people, governments who inspected it would say, oh, this passport is in the name of Irene Steffas, but here's her marriage certificate that now she's gone from A. Steffas to S. and Steffas. So that's all I had to do. So there I would not bother getting a new certificate of citizenship, but when it's time to get a passport, I would definitely get it in the new name. So why wouldn't I get a new certificate of citizenship? Mm-hmm. Everything is indexed and saved into the big computer system through the alien registration number, not through a child's name.
So
the alien registration.
Okay, go ahead.
Through the alien registration number, we know that this child is a citizen, period.
Okay, so your point is that as long as you've got, but although would there be an advantage? I'm sitting here thinking, you're, let's say your child, is arrested for some reason and is having to prove their citizenship. Would there be an advantage of having the certificate of citizenship with the child's current the name that is the child goes by? Is there an advantage? And then if there is, how do you go about changing the child's name on the certificate of citizenship?
Okay, so let's just say they pull a child over and this child is arrested for DWI or for shoplifting or grand larceny. Let's make it grand larceny.
Yeah, why not? That's terrible.
Okay, so hopefully the first thing they're going to do is call their parents and say, I need you to post bail. Yeah. But if the parents have their original passport or a copy of their passport that their child entered with, in that passport you'll see the IR3, IR4, IH4, IH3. But you'll also see, handwritten in the older passports, a number that begins with the letter A. That is your key. So let's say they arrest you and they say, well, you look funny. You're not from here. We think you're from Southeast Asia. How do I prove that you're a citizen? Okay, here is my A number, my alien registration number. They put that in the computer. This is your local your local police department can do this. Puts that in the computer. Boom, this child is a citizen. So the name is not the key to the citizenship, proving citizenship. It's the alien registration number.
Is it possible to change the name on the certificate?
Sure. You can change the name. You can change the date of birth. If you don't mind paying, I think it's $565.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you can do it. I wouldn't bother, but you can do that.
Yeah, I tell you, I'm more, but not because of that cost. That would give me pause. But I'm
right.
more. I'm both more into convenience, and I'm also. I don't know. I just think that they're both from a convenience and a safety standpoint. Although I'm not sure that I would pay the amount of money. That
right.
I don't know that I would want to do that, and it didn't used to be that expensive, but now it certainly is. So how long does it take, or how long should you wait before you worry if you've adopted your child, you've arrived in the U.S., and you're waiting for the child's certificate of citizenship? How long does it usually take, and when should you worry, and what do you do if you haven't gotten it?
What do you do? Okay. Well, it used to come within 6 to 8 weeks. It is now taking 6 months. If it takes longer than 6 months, my recommendation is don't go to the attorney, because there are things we can do and there's things that we can't control. I would contact your local congressman or senator and let them find out what's happened to your child's certificate of citizenship. Number one, they're going to do it free. They're going to do it faster than I can do it or any other attorney can do it. And it's pretty easy to do. You're going to have to give sign a privacy waiver with some staffer who works for the senator or congressman, and you're going to have to produce probably a copy of the child's passport that has the A number in it. That A number is really the key to everything. Okay?
Okay. All right, so that's what you would do if you haven't gotten it, but you should expect it to take, you should not be worrying about it until after about the 6-month point.
Correct.
Okay. All right, and that's kind of important here. All right, so you have adopted a child, and you need, for whatever reason, or want, for whatever reason, to travel with that child outside of the U.S. Can you use, your child has come to the U.S. on a foreign passport. Can you use that passport? Let's say you've got a vacation in someplace in Mexico, so you want to go there. Is that possible to use your child's foreign passport?
Sure. I would check the expiration date of that passport, because when you're entering the U.S. with a foreign passport, it has to be good for at least 6 months. Okay, that's the first thing. Number two, I would make sure that there's usually going to be a stamp in the passport that says the child's tourist visa to enter the U.S. or the IR visa, IH visa to enter the U.S. expires in 1 year. Now, sometime between the time your child originally came and your cruise to Mexico, your child should have in hand a copy of their permanent resident card. So if they have a permanent resident card and a valid foreign passport, you're good to go. Now, those permanent resident cards are usually taken or given to children when they're very young. So if you want to take your 16-year-old on a cruise, and their permanent resident card has a baby picture on it, you probably should get an updated permanent resident card if you don't have it, unless they're a citizen.
No, so you should get your certificate of citizenship. By golly, that's what you need to be doing.
Well, I agree with you, but the certificate of citizenship today might take 2 years, and your cruise is scheduled for June. So we see this a lot, and we see this with college applications also. So in those cases, we renew the resident card, and that's not as expensive as a certificate of citizenship, and it now will have a current picture of the child on it. And so you can, with that card and with any passport, the child can enter and leave the U.S.
Okay, perfect. And hidden in all that was the amount of time it may take you if you have an older child where you did not automatically get your certificate of citizenship.
Exactly.
And for whatever reason you have forgotten to get that, and you're listening to Irene Steffas talk today, and you know that, oh, by golly, I must get that. You need to get on it quick, because it's going to take. I mean, it can potentially take not months but years.
Yes.
So how do you apply for a certificate of citizenship? What do you have to submit? At this point, we're assuming your child was here before February 2004. So, what do we need to do to get that certificate of citizenship? Okay.
So you brought up a good point. What if your child was here prior to January 2004? If let's say you adopted your child and they came in 1999, the key is they were under the age of 18 on February the 27th, 2001. That's the date that the Child Citizenship Act went into effect. And one of the nice things that it did is it grandfathered in all children who were under the age of 18 and had entered with those IR3s and IH3 visas. So even if your child is 25 today, you can still file the N-600, pay the fee of $1,170, and send it in for to obtain the certificate of citizenship for the child. Actually, if your child is an adult, they can do it on their own.
Let me just stop you there and say that is the cost as of the day we are talking. You need to check with the State Department to see what the current fee is, and undoubtedly it will be a different fee when you're actually doing it. So don't use that amount, because it could be changed.
Right.
And that to find out, you would go to travel.state.gov. Okay, go ahead.
Actually, you might be able to find it there, but I'm going to guess that the site that you just gave, Dawn, that is for the State Department. And if you want passports, that's definitely where you want to go.
Yeah,
but if you want a certificate of citizenship, you want to go to the USCIS website, which is uscis.gov. Now, make sure you go to the website that says GOV, because if you don't, they're crooks and they're going to steal your money. So if you go there, you can then get the form and the instructions. The form is, in my opinion, is confusing because it includes all foreign-born children, children who've been adopted, and children who are the biological children of U.S. citizens. So as you're going through it, it's not the easiest form to navigate through. So even though the instructions are, I think, 16 pages long, I highly recommend you read the instructions if you're going to do it yourself. And that will also tell you where to file it.
And something that happened to us was we, and this is kind of an unusual thing, where the price went down. It was whatever it was. And then for whatever reason, after we submitted everything, the price was reduced by $5. We sent in our check and everything, and we waited for what seemed like an absolute forever period of time, and then it got rejected. It came back to us because we had overpaid by $5. And we had to.
That was a long time ago, Dawn.
It was, yeah. Well, that child's in early 20s. Maybe very early 20s.
Right.
Yeah. So So I mean, that's something to realize that you need to. Hence why I say check the exact amount, because it has to be the exact amount. They're not going to, and they reject the entire thing. Send it all back to you, and you have to start all over again. So you go, and I'm glad you pointed that out. I do believe that the State Department site has a link to it, but you're exactly right.
Exactly.
USCIS.gov is where you would get that information. I'm so glad you. Okay. So what information do you have to have a copy of to submit in order to get your child's certificate of citizenship, assuming that you aren't fortunate enough to have had a child have it automatically be sent to you?
Well, you need to show the child's post-adoption birth certificate, the final decree of adoption, whether that's overseas or in the U.S., a copy of the child's passport, photographs of the child. These are the passport photos. You have to show that the petitioner, and it's so confusing because it says you, which makes you think, well, the child is you. No, the you is the parents, or vice versa. And so you go through all of that. If the adoptive parents have been divorced, you have to produce the divorce decrees. The number of documents is I find it excessive. But the reason it's excessive is because they use the same form for everybody born out of the U.S. And so that you're scratching your head and you say, well, why do you need my divorce decree, for Pete's sakes? Well, because if this had been a biological child and you weren't one of the original parents, and maybe they're getting it from the step parent is the one who's petitioning. The step parent a child cannot derive citizenship from a step parent. In our context, a child can only receive citizenship from a U.S. citizen. So this is something I wanted to talk about, and that's the second chance adoptions. When there's a second chance adoption, meaning that the first adoption disrupted prior to finalization or was dissolved, everyone is concerned about the child's safety, the child's stability, getting good housing, protecting the child. And what people seem to forget all the time is preserving that child's documents, their immigration documents. And we have several cases right now where child is 24, wants to travel, and I have nothing regarding his adoption from his first family when he was adopted from Russia. I don't have his alien registration number. And so you want to preserve those things. You need to make sure that the second family, or if you're the second family, you want to make sure that you get the child's passport. If you get nothing else, that passport has all the golden nuggets in there that you're going to need. It'd be nice to get a copy of the foreign decree, the foreign birth certificate, but absolutely you want to get that passport. And by passport, you are meaning the child's the passport foreign
that
passport,
the child
yes.
came to the U.S. on.
Exactly, because that passport's going to give you the child's date of birth, place of birth. The passport is also going to give you the child's alien registration number. And
that's
with that, that's correct.
Excellent. Okay, yeah, I'm glad you brought up some of the really sad cases that have been reported in the news have happened with adoptees that where their adoption dissolved and the child then went to a second family, and the second family didn't think about the certificate of completion or didn't have the information with which to get that. So
right.
That's a very important point. All right. Now, I know you're saying that a U.S. passport is only needed really for travel. Being the paranoid person that I am, I think that people should get their child a passport because I think there are just advantages to that.
Sure,
So
and it's convenient. It's easy.
It's convenient. Exactly. So, what type of documents do you need to submit to get a U.S. passport for a intercountry adopted child?
Well, you're going to have to, again, show proof of birth, which would be a birth certificate, the post-adoption birth certificate, the final decree, the child's alien registration number, and what is being requested at 98% of the passport offices today is they want to see the certificate of citizenship. You may get by, you might get lucky, but I wouldn't count on it getting a passport unless you have your certificate of citizenship in hand.
Okay, and that means the original is what we're talking about.
Yes,
sadly,
the original one. It's going to be okay, Dawn. They're going to send it back to you. Don't worry.
I got to tell you, I know you say that, but I'm going to tell you, Irene, I was scared every time, just terrified. But
sure.
But you're correct. I did get it back every time. Okay. Moving us along to talking about other official documents that our children might need, and certainly what immediately comes up is Social Security cards, and often comes up when people are trying to file their taxes and want to get the child tax credit, the first year afterwards. So, but let's first of all, do you have? How do you obtain a Social Security number for your internationally adopted child?
Well, if it's happened in the last few years, it's going to arrive magically in the mailbox. You don't actually have to go through the application period anymore. There was a time when you had to go through it. But I'm glad you mentioned passports, because let's say you're listening to this call and your child is 30 years old and you have no clue what you did with your child's original paperwork. You can, for $50, you can do a Freedom of Information Act request to the Social Security Administration. And in 1 month, you get back everything that had originally been filed. So you may be able to retrieve documents that have been lost, misplaced, through Social Security Administration. But today it's automatic. Yeah.
That is such a good tip,
cool.
Because you can lose. I mean, it's not unheard of, shall we say, that that documentation gets lost. Okay, cool. So what if your child's English name is not on their Social Security card? Is that something that needs to be corrected, and how do you correct it?
Well, Social Security Administration probably wants an official court order, which you would have done in your readoption. Okay? And so if you have not done a readoption and the child's original name from China is still on his post-adoption birth certificate, is still on the adoption decree, was on the child's visa, then you're going to need to go to court, do the readoption, and then produce that to show the child's new surname. New adopted name, I should say, not just the surname.
The entire name, right. Okay.
Right.
All right. So that's an argument for a readoption. Is there a way to bypass this, if you're thinking about this before you travel to pick up your child, to try to increase the odds of your child's new name being on all these documents?
Sure. Whatever agency, accredited agency that you're working with to do an intercountry adoption, they have the tools to be able to get the post-adoption birth certificate. And they have the tools to say, Judge, we would like to change Johnny's name to Isaac Benjamin. Oftentimes what I have seen is that the agency didn't want to wait around or didn't want to pay the extra fee for the post-adoption birth certificate. But I'm telling you, I can't speak for 100% of the countries, and there are countries that will not change the child's name. So if you are adopting from the Caribbean or Belize, you're going to have to do a readoption so that you can change your child's name.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Their courts will not do that.
And you may or may not, depending on the state and how complex it is, need to have an attorney to help you
That's correct.
file that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct.
And if you have not received a Social Security number for your child, and this would be only, I would assume, since it's coming automatic now, it would probably just be depending on when the child is adopted, but you want to file your taxes. What do you do then? Because you're wanting to get the child tax credit.
Okay. So you would go down to the Social Security office in person. You want to show the child's visa, the IR3, the IR4, whatever it is. And if it's a 4, that you also need to submit your readoption or finalization of the guardianship, and then they will issue it to you. Now, let's say your child entered with a 4 visa, but you want to do this year's taxes. You can go down there. They will give you to the Social Security Administration, they will give you a Social Security card with an expiration date on it. So you still need to go to court and finish things off in state court, and then you'll get the permanent one, permanent Social Security number. And the number won't change, but it'll be infinite.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So if you had, if we were giving you one, if you could make sure you get one message across to adoptive parents who are adopting internationally on how they need to, in order to protect their children, both now and in the future, what would that message be? I'm going to give you your soapbox right now. You get to stand on that soapbox. And, go ahead.
Stand tall. If your child enters with an IR4 or an IH4, you have taken an oath before the consular officer in the foreign country, the U.S. consulate, and you've promised that you were going to readopt them. Readopt the child once you came to the U.S. Do it. Please do it. It's for your child's future safety to make sure that your child isn't removed from the United States. So 4s, there's more to do, and do it sooner than later. Don't wait till they're almost 16, because I would say right now 90% of our N600s are for kids who are about to turn 16 or have already turned 16. So do it. Just don't forget to do it. Don't put it off. Get it done.
Yeah. We know you're sick of filing papers. We know that you have, that you have a stack of papers to the moon and back for what you have already completed. But you've got one more to go. You have not reached the finish line.
Right.
You are so close.
And you can see, you can go online and search. There have been over 50 children who were adopted but entered with an IR4 or an IH4, or their parents just never got around to doing their adoption. And those children were sent out of the country to a country that they don't even speak the language and that they have no contacts. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to see about shoring up those cases. That shouldn't happen to any adopted child.
No.
It's heartbreaking for everybody.
Yes, it absolutely is. Thank you so much, Irene Steffas, for talking with us today about this topic of protecting our internationally adopted kids' citizenship.
You're quite welcome, Dawn. What I usually sign off on, this is my tagline on all the papers I write, it's not just another case. It's the life of a child.
Amen.
And I know that the people who are listening are going to take heed.
They will. Let's talk just very briefly about the Adoptee Citizenship Act, because you mentioned that there have been over 50 kids who have been removed, what we used to call deported, and the Adoptee Citizenship Act is intended to apply the protection of citizenship to all children, regardless of whether they were adopted before 2001. Do you know the current status of that, where that is right now?
I know it has been brought up several times. I believe that the most recent proposed legislation was put forth by Senator Klobuchar, but where it is if it's in a committee or here or there, that part I don't know. Again, if your child entered with the IR4 or IH4, this new bill is not going to save them. Mm-hmm. So you still have to go to court. Don't get too
Don't
comfy.
rely on it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay, that's a good point. But it would help your child otherwise. And Creating a Family is part of the group that's advocating for this act. So subscribe to our newsletter or join us on any of our social media, because we will be posting when there is a call to please contact us. Coming up for a vote, please contact your representative. You can find out through us. And to sign up for our newsletter, you go to the top right on any page of our website. And Irene, I wanted to ask you one last question, because it's not relevant to adoption per se, but it's one we got, and this person asked, is it true that an adoption takes place when you use an egg donor or sperm donor or donor embryo that is not genetically related to yourself? If so, how do you protect the citizenship for an internationally adopted egg, sperm, or embryo? So, yeah, I mean, and you have the unique qualifications to not only being an adoption attorney, but you also are assisted reproductive, because you and I have talked about that before, too.
Right.
So, anyway, any thoughts for this person?
Okay. Yes. If the U.S. citizen intended parent, if the intended parents, either the husbands or the wives or the partners, DNA is used, meaning we're using somebody's sperm or somebody's egg of the intended parents, then that child is considered a U.S. citizen. You're going to have to do DNA testing, but that child is considered a U.S. citizen. If you're using donor egg, donor sperm, and the U.S. citizen delivers the baby, gives birth to the child, that child is also a U.S. citizen, and that was a rather recent change in the policy of the State Department. That is not a change in the law or the regulations, but in the policy, and that was quite incredible that they did that. But you're going to need letters supporting all of this. So the key is, if you are the gestational carrier, your child will receive citizenship through you. If either of the intended parents' DNA belongs to the child is also going to be a U.S. citizen. But you're going to file for a consular's report of birth abroad. It's called CRBA, C-R-B-A, and it looks just like a birth certificate, and it's issued by the U.S. consulates overseas. So if you're doing this domestically, you're okay, but if you're doing this internationally, you can still get citizenship for your child.
Okay,
by
now,
filing the CRBA with the consulate. Mm-hmm.
All right. The husband's sperm, but an egg donor, and let's say you get a donor egg from abroad. The embryo is the typical thing is if the intended mother is going to carry the baby. The embryo is transferred abroad. She comes back to the United States, and the baby's born here, so it's kind of a moot point.
Right.
But where it comes up is through surrogacy, if you're using an international surrogate. And if only one parent, let's say it is the husband's sperm is used, but only one parent has a genetic connection to the child, is that enough, or do both parents have to have a genetic connection?
Only one parent has to have a genetic link to the child
for
citizenship.
For citizenship. So the main problem comes when you use both donor egg and donor sperm. So neither of
and a gestational carrier who's not related,
and a gestational carrier who's not a foreign gestational carrier who doesn't have citizenship,
right.
Or a mistake, because that has happened where there has
Yes.
been a mix-up and the embryo that was transferred was the wrong embryo, and the baby is born and the parents want this child. So what happens then? The baby is born to a foreign surrogate, and either it was a donor egg and donor sperm, so a non-genetic connection, or a donated embryo, or a mistake in some way. Then you do the criba, and that is enough to get the child here?
No. You have to show a genetic link.
Yeah, that's
or
what
you
I
have
thought.
to be a gestational carrier to get the criba. But let's say we have it was a mistake, wrong embryo, and the adoptive intended mother did not deliver the child.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're
born
going
abroad
to have
to a surrogate.
Right. You're going to need a very, very good attorney in the U.S. and an excellent attorney in the country where the child was born, because in many countries, surrogacy is against the law. We're seeing tightened up regulations in India. In Sweden, it is against the law. And so you're going to need a lot of help. And saying, you can adopt the child from Sweden or you can adopt the child from India, not so easy, because those are countries who have ratified the Hague Convention, and if you were going to do an adoption, you have to do a convention adoption. So there are some things. They're not definite, but I have seen certain things done in those unusual situations, and all I can say is you need a fantastic attorney overseas and a very, very good attorney in the United States, excellent attorney both places, to be able to bring that child home.
Okay, we're not trying to scare people, but it does happen, and something to think about when going abroad with a gestational,
Yes,
or even or traditional, if that's even something that people are still doing. I know that people will want to reach out to, again, it says Irene Steffas. Her firm is Steffas and Associates, and her website is HagueAdoptions.com. That is HagueAdoptions.com. And let me remind you that this show is brought to you by the generous support of our partners who believe in our mission. And one of our wonderful partners is Adoptions from Shepherd Care. They are a nonprofit adoption agency founded in 1980, providing domestic infant adoption, international adoption from Colombia, and domestic and Hague-approved international home studies. Thank you so much for being with us today, and I will see you next week.
Your hands were made for greatness. Mighty hands for painting, paneling, and clicking the submit order button on HomeDepot.com to get that duvet. And these Egyptian cotton towels delivered right to your door. Do more with decor at the Home Depot. Save up to 30% on select bedding and bath. Now at HomeDepot.com. More saving, more kinds of doing. Valid on select items online only. Free delivery on select items $45 or more. Enter promo code BEDBATH15 at purchase for an extra 15% off. Visit HomeDepot.com for more information.
And now, an ad from Dad.
All right, save money on car insurance when you bundle home and auto with Progressive. Can I take these off? All right. What is this? This looks good. Wow, that's well made. Where did you get this? I'm talking to you with the hair. Yeah, where did you get this? It's good stuff. That's solid. That's not veneer. That's solid stuff.
Progressive can't save you from becoming your parents, but we can save you money when you bundle home and auto. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Discounts not available in all states or situations.